Hi everyone, welcome to MedGoto. In this video, we'll be talking about another type of necrosis, which is fat necrosis. So by definition, what's fat necrosis? So this is a type of necrosis that involves the necrosis of the fat tissue. So this is a type of, like we mentioned in the previous video, that different type of necrosis are named based on the gross appearance, right? So this is a type of necrosis whereby what we see is the necrosis of the fat tissue, right? And there was a mechanism behind this fat necrosis. So the mechanism is divided into two. Number one, it could involve the enzyme. So if you involve the enzyme, we call it enzymatic fat necrosis, right? And the other type is when it doesn't involve the enzyme, which is what we call the non-enzymatic fat necrosis. But we're going to start with the enzymatic fat necrosis that involves an enzyme. So a classic example that we can use here is the acute pancreatitis. So acute pancreatitis. So this is a classic example of enzymatic fat necrosis. So let's see what happened. As we all know, we know that the function of the pancreas, right, is we have what we call the endocrine function, right, and then we have the exocrine, right, function. The exocrine, those are the hormones, right, that are released into the GI system, right? Maybe they help with digestion, right? And then some of these exocrine hormones, right? Some of them are protease, right? That help with digestion of protein. Example like our trypsin, right? And then we also have the ones that help with digestion of fats, right? Example like our lipase, right? And so on and so forth, right? So this protease, because they can digest the protein, and the pancreas itself, right? Most of the tissue in our body, they are made up of protein. So these enzymes, they are released as inactive form. So you don't want them to be activated inside the pancreas. So they are released as inactive form into the GI tract and into the gastrointestinal tract. And right there, that's when they become activated, right? But for no reason, if the pancreatic duct maybe is blocked, right? Like in the case of gallstone, say somebody have gallstone, because when you look at the pancreatic duct, it combines with the common bile duct, right? So they kind of like share almost the same tract. So if anything block the ampulla, right? The ampulla of Vata, right? That could block the secretion that's coming from the pancreatic duct. So maybe from a gallstone, or if somebody is drinking a lot of alcohol, or if somebody have too much of triglyceride, right? Or in the case of cystic fibrosis, right? If somebody have very high triglyceride, or in the case of cystic fibrosis, so all this could thicken this secretion and it can become blocked. So if it become blocked, right, this enzyme will become activated. So this protease enzyme, right, they become activated inside the pancreas, right? And then this, as a result of that, that will start to digest the pancreas. And when you look around the pancreas, right, we have what we call the peripancreatic fats. We call them peripancreatic fats, right? So when this protease enzyme becomes activated, right, so they start to digest the pancreas, right? So as they are digesting the pancreas, so this lipase now, the lipase is going to be released, right, into the surrounding tissue, right? So those lipase that have been released, the pancreatic lipase, that has been released into the surrounding tissue, right? So the lipase, they want to convert the fat cells, so the triglyceride, into free fatty acid. So those lipase will convert this triglyceride in the fat cells into free fatty acid. And then this free fatty acid now, right? Those free fatty acid, they want to combine with calcium, right? And that process is what we call saponification. So we call it saponification. Right? So, which is the process of adding calcium to free fatty acid, which is the process of how we normally make what's called soap, right? And as a result of that, right, we are depositing calcium into necrotic fat cells, right? And this type of calcification is what we refer to as dystrophic calcification. I know a lot of terms that we're using, right? So dystrophic calcification is the process whereby a calcium is deposited in a necrotic tissue, right? Even though there's a normal calcium, normal phosphorus, but those calcium, they are being deposited inside those necrotic tissues. So that's what we refer to as dystrophic what? Dystrophic calcification. And this is a classic example of enzymatic fat necrosis, right? And on the microscope, right, on the gross, what are we going to see? So on gross finding, what are we going to see? So you want to see those chalky, yellow, white deposits around the pancreas. And then sometimes it can also be on the omentum at this position. And then what about on the under microscope? So the microscopy finding. So microscopy finding, we're going to see those pale outline of dead fat cells and absence of peripheral. Because normally when you look at the fat cells, normally the nucleus of the fat cell, they are usually located in the periphery. But when you see all those necrotic fat cells, right, you're going to see those dead fat cells, and those peripheral nuclei that we're supposed to see, they are not going to be located there, right? And also because fat the free fatty acid is combined with calcium, right, which is what we call saponification. So this will appear dark blue, right, or basophilic on our H and E stain. So when you apply H and E stain, right, they want to appear as dark blue or basophilic. Right? So it's something that we need to remember, right? So this is what we see with enzymatic fat necrosis, right? And we can see based on this, right, we can actually kind of like figure out some of the complications that we can see in somebody who's having acute pancreatitis, right? So because we're going to be using a lot of those calcium, right, to bind to those free fatty acid. So this patient can run the risk of hypocalcemia. So which is one of the things that we monitor for in this patient, right? The other thing that we should also watch out for, right? Because in the pancreas, right, in the islet cells, right, of the pancreas, where we have the beta cells, and the beta cell normally make insulin, right? And as we all know, we know that insulin normally moves the glucose into the cell, right? So if somebody is having acute pancreatitis and they are not making enough insulin, right? So you can't move the glucose into the cell. So they have a lot of glucose in the blood, right? So that will also lead to hyperglycemia. And so they can have hyperglycemia. The other thing we can also watch out for, right, in this patient is that because of the digestion of the pancreas, right, by those proteins, right, so they become permeable, right? So we have capillary permeable, so those vessels they become permeable, and then we start having what they call third spacing, right? So those fluids that are supposed to be in the vasculature, they move into the interstitial space. So there's something that we call third spacing. So because those fluids are moving out of the vasculature into the interstitial, right? That means they can develop what? They can become hypotensive. So that's why when this patient comes in, they are very hypotensive. We flood them with a lot of IV fluid, right? We give them a lot of fluid, right? And because those fluid are moving out of the vasculation, into the third space, right? They can become hemo concentration. So basically, what that means is that their red blood cell counts, right? Their hemoglobin count is going to go up, right? Because they become dry, right? So they can become hemo concentrated, right? And that's why it's important, right? Because as this patient is improving, those fluid in the third space, they tend to move back into the vasculature as they're improving. And at that point, those patients can be at increases for fluid overload, right? Which is something that we normally watch out for, right? So at that point, we might need to give them some laces to prevent them from getting fluid overloaded. The other thing that's also important to mention, although when we get to GI, we're going to talk in details about acute pancreatitis, right? The other thing to also that's also worth mentioning is that in this patient, right? So because of the capillary permeability, so one of the proteins that will also be released into the blood, example like the elastase, right? So this could damage the lungs and it can put the patient at high risk for acute respiratory distress syndrome. So that's why sometimes this patient could develop ARDS, so which is also worth mentioning, right? So that's enzymatic fat necrosis, right? So moving on to another type of fat necrosis, which is non-enzymatic. Non-enzymatic fat necrosis. So with non-enzymatic fat necrosis, this is usually due to trauma to the fat tissue. So usually due to trauma to the fat tissue. And this usually occurs in the area of our body whereby we have a lot of fat, right? So example like the breast tissue. And then we can also see it in the abdominal fat. And in those areas, we can see those non-enzymatic fat necrosis. So basically, this is a type of fat necrosis whereby no enzyme is involved. It's just as a result of the trauma. And most of the time, these patients don't even remember, they can't remember when they had the trauma, right? And sometimes those, if you happen the breast, it's something that you can see. Sometimes we can pick up on the mammogram, and whereby you can see those findings. And I hope this helps us to be able to understand fat necrosis. If you are here to subscribe to the channel, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Put on the notification bell so that each time we upload a video, you can get the notification. And in the next video, we're going to talk about the other types of necrosis. Thank you for watching.